The CIA uses solitary confinement as torture, but billionaires pay millions for isolation retreats. One destroys minds, the other creates them. The difference? Something they'll never teach you. You're here because you noticed successful people are comfortable being alone while others panic. Subscribe. You're about to learn the psychological secret they use to build mental strength. This explains why some people break under isolation, while others become unstoppable. Today, we're going to explore why Machiavelli understood something that modern society desperately wants to hide from you. That true power comes not from being loved by everyone, but from being completely self-sufficient in your solitude. The illusion of social dependency. What if I told you that your need for constant social interaction is actually a carefully constructed prison? What if the very thing you think makes you human is actually what's keeping you weak? Listen carefully. Every single day, you wake up and immediately reach for your phone. Not because you need information, not because you're curious about the world, but because you're terrified of being alone with your own thoughts. Machiavelli wrote in The Prince that everyone sees what you appear to be, few experience what you really are. But here's what he didn't say explicitly. Most people never even discover what they really are because they're too busy performing for others. Your social media addiction isn't about connection. It's about escape. Your constant texting isn't about communication. It's about avoiding the confrontation with your authentic self. Every party you attend, every social gathering you force yourself into, every conversation you have just to fill the silence, it's all a sophisticated form of self-abandonment. Think about the most successful people you know. The real ones, not the social media influencers. The actual powerful individuals who shape reality. They all share one common trait. They're completely comfortable being alone. They don't need external validation to make decisions. They don't need a committee to approve their thoughts. They don't need an audience to feel valuable. But you've been conditioned to believe that solitude equals loneliness, that being alone means being rejected, that isolation is punishment. This is the greatest lie ever sold to humanity. Because when you're constantly seeking approval from others, you become controllable. When you need social validation to feel worthy, you become predictable. When you can't sit alone with your thoughts for even 10 minutes, you become weak. But what happens when you break free from this psychological prison? What becomes possible when you stop needing anyone else to feel complete? The Machiavellian truth about human nature. Here's what Machiavelli understood about human nature that will make you question everything you believe about relationships. Most people don't actually care about you. They care about what you can do for them. Niccolò Machiavelli spent his life studying power, politics, and human behavior. His most profound insight wasn't about governing states. It was about governing yourself. He recognized that most human interactions are transactional. People approach you with hidden agendas. They smile at you while calculating what they can extract from you. They offer friendship while secretly competing with you. This isn't cynicism. This is reality. Right now, think about your social circle. How many of those people would still be in your life if you couldn't provide them with entertainment, resources, emotional support, or social status? How many would choose to spend time with you if you offered nothing but your pure, authentic presence? The uncomfortable truth is that most of your relationships are built on mutual utility, not genuine connection. You entertain them, they validate you. You provide them with emotional labor, they give you a sense of belonging. You offer them social proof, they offer you the same. It's a marketplace of human needs disguised as friendship. Machiavelli wrote, Men are so simple and so ready to obey present necessities. This means people will always act in their immediate self-interest. They'll abandon you when it's convenient, betray you when it benefits them, and replace you when they find someone more useful. Not because they're evil, because they're human. But when you understand this, something miraculous happens. You stop expecting people to be what they're not. You stop being disappointed when they act according to their nature. You stop giving your power away to individuals who were never worthy of it in the first place. More importantly, you start developing the most valuable skill any human can possess: complete emotional self-sufficiency. You learn to generate your own validation, create your own entertainment, provide your own emotional support. You become a closed loop of psychological strength. This is when you transform from someone who needs others to someone others need. This is when you stop being prey and start being predator. The psychology of solitude mastery. Every great mind in history had one thing in common. They knew how to be alone with their thoughts without going insane. But you've been trained to fear the very thing that could set you free. Marcus Aurelius wrote his meditations in complete solitude. Nikola Tesla made his greatest discoveries in isolation. Steve Jobs had his most revolutionary ideas during long, solitary walks. Napoleon planned his conquests alone in his study. These weren't antisocial individuals. They were people who understood that genius emerges from solitude, not from committees. But somewhere along the way, society convinced you that spending time alone is unhealthy, that you need to be constantly surrounded by people to be mentally stable. That isolation leads to depression and anxiety. This is psychological manipulation designed to keep you dependent on external systems of validation and control. The truth is, solitude is where you meet your authentic self. It's where you discover what you actually think, not what you think you should think. It's where you uncover what you truly want, not what others want for you. It's where you develop the ability to trust your own judgment instead of constantly seeking consensus. When you're alone, you can't hide behind social masks. You can't perform a character to gain approval. You can't distract yourself with other people's drama. You're forced to confront the reality of who you are, what you've become, and what you're capable of becoming. This is terrifying for most people because they've spent their entire lives running from themselves. They've built elaborate social personas to avoid dealing with their authentic thoughts and feelings. They've surrounded themselves with noise to avoid hearing their inner voice. They've created busy social schedules to avoid confronting their deepest fears and desires. But here's what happens when you stop running. First, you experience what psychologists call emotional regulation. You learn to process your feelings without needing someone else to validate them. You develop the ability to sit with discomfort without immediately seeking external relief. You build psychological resilience that can't be shaken by other people's opinions or actions. Second, you develop what Machiavelli called virtù, the ability to adapt to any situation without losing your core identity. When you're not dependent on others for emotional stability, you become anti-fragile. Rejection doesn't destroy you because you don't need acceptance. Criticism doesn't devastate you because you trust your own judgment. Betrayal doesn't break you because you were never truly dependent on anyone else's loyalty. But the most powerful transformation happens in your relationship with power itself. When you master solitude, you become ungovernable, becoming strategically dangerous. Machiavelli said, "It is better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both." But what he really meant was, it's better to be self-sufficient than dependent. When you're comfortable in solitude, you develop something that makes you incredibly dangerous to those who want to control you. You become unpredictable. People can no longer manipulate you with social pressure because you don't need their approval. They can't control you with isolation because you actually prefer it. They can't threaten you with abandonment because you're perfectly fine alone. This is when you develop what I call strategic social engagement. Instead of desperately seeking connection, you choose when, how, and with whom you interact. Instead of being reactive to social dynamics, you become proactive. Instead of being at the mercy of other people's moods and behaviors, you set the terms of engagement. Think about how this changes every interaction in your life. In romantic relationships, you stop tolerating bad behavior because you're afraid of being alone. You start setting boundaries because you'd rather be single than disrespected. In friendships, you stop maintaining relationships that drain your energy because you prefer quality solitude to toxic company. At work, you stop people-pleasing your way through politics because you're not desperate for social acceptance. People sense this shift immediately. They recognize that you've become someone who can't be easily controlled or manipulated. This makes you simultaneously more attractive and more intimidating. Some people will be drawn to your self-sufficiency because it's so rare. Others will be threatened by it because it highlights their own dependency. Machiavelli understood that the most dangerous person in any room is the one who doesn't need anything from anyone else. They can't be bought with flattery, controlled with social pressure, or manipulated with emotional blackmail. They operate from a position of authentic strength rather than compensated weakness. But here's the paradox. When you stop needing people, they start needing you. When you become comfortable with solitude, others become curious about your inner world. When you stop chasing validation, people start competing for your attention. When you develop genuine self-respect, others begin respecting you automatically. This isn't a manipulation strategy. It's a natural consequence of psychological strength. People are instinctively drawn to individuals who possess what they lack. Most people are desperate for approval, so they gravitate toward those who don't need it. Most people fear being alone, so they're fascinated by those who enjoy it. But the real power isn't in how others respond to you. The real power is in who you become when you're alone. The dark psychology of self-mastery. What I'm about to tell you will make you uncomfortable, but it's the truth that separates the powerful from the powerless. Your biggest enemy isn't other people. It's your own need for their approval. Every successful person eventually learns this lesson. You can't control others, but you can control yourself. You can't guarantee how people will treat you, but you can guarantee how you'll respond. You can't make others respect you, but you can respect yourself so completely that their opinion becomes irrelevant. This is where Machiavelli's philosophy becomes psychologically transformative. He didn't just study political power, he understood personal power, the ability to make decisions without consensus, the strength to stand alone when necessary, the courage to pursue your vision even when no one else believes in it. But most people never develop this because they're addicted to external validation. They need constant reassurance that they're on the right path. They require continuous approval to feel worthy. They depend on social feedback to make decisions. This dependency makes them weak, predictable, and ultimately unsuccessful. When you master solitude, you develop what psychologists call internal locus of control. This means you believe that your actions, rather than external forces, determine the outcomes in your life. You stop blaming others for your problems. You stop waiting for someone else to save you. You stop expecting the world to accommodate your weaknesses. Instead, You become the architect of your own reality. You create your own opportunities instead of waiting for them to appear. You solve your own problems instead of complaining about them. You validate your own worth instead of seeking it from others. You become what every powerful person throughout history has been, completely self-reliant. This is when you discover the most dangerous truth about human nature. Most people are operating from fear, not love. Fear of rejection, fear of abandonment, fear of judgment, fear of being alone. Their entire personality is a defense mechanism against these fears. Their social behavior is designed to avoid pain, not create pleasure. But when you're comfortable in solitude, you're operating from a completely different psychological framework. You're not trying to avoid pain. You're pursuing growth. You're not seeking safety. You're embracing risk. You're not protecting your ego. You're expanding your capabilities. This makes you unpredictable in a world where most people are desperately predictable. While others are making decisions based on what will gain them social approval, you're making decisions based on what will move you closer to your goals. While others are avoiding difficult conversations to maintain relationships, you're having difficult conversations to maintain your integrity. And this is where you become truly dangerous. Not to others, but to the systems that depend on your compliance. When you stop needing approval, you become ungovernable. The practical transformation. Everything I've shared is useless unless you know how to actually implement it. So here's exactly how you transform from someone who needs others to someone who chooses others. First, you must create what I call intentional isolation periods. These aren't punishments or withdrawals from society. They're strategic investments in your psychological independence. Start with 1 hour per day where you're completely alone with no external stimulation. No phone, no music, no books, no distractions. Just you and your thoughts. This will be incredibly uncomfortable at first because you've been conditioned to fear your own mind. You'll want to reach for your phone. You'll create imaginary emergencies that require your immediate attention. You'll convince yourself that this exercise is pointless. This discomfort is the exact reason you need to do it. You're breaking a psychological addiction to external stimulation. During these periods, practice what Machiavelli called contemplation of fortune. Think about your goals, your strategies, your relationships, your decisions. But think about them from a position of detachment, not emotional reactivity. Ask yourself, what am I doing because I want to? And what am I doing because I think I should? What decisions am I making from strength? And what decisions am I making from fear? Second, implement what I call social fasting. Periodically withdraw from all non-essential social interactions. This means no casual texting, no social media scrolling, no attending events just because you were invited. During these periods, observe how you feel. Notice the urge to reach out to people not because you have something meaningful to share, but because you're uncomfortable with silence. This isn't about becoming antisocial. It's about becoming intentionally social. When you return to social interactions after these fasting periods, you'll notice that you engage differently. You'll be more present because you're not desperately seeking validation. You'll be more authentic because you're not performing for approval. You'll be more selective because you understand the value of your time and energy. Third, develop what I call decision independence. Start making decisions without consulting anyone else. Begin with small choices: what to eat, what to wear, how to spend your evening. Notice how often you automatically seek input from others not because you need advice, but because you're afraid of taking responsibility for your choices. Gradually increase the significance of the decisions you make independently. Choose your career path based on your authentic interests, not social expectations. End relationships that drain your energy, regardless of what others think. Pursue goals that excite you, even if they seem unconventional to your social circle. The goal isn't to become isolated or antisocial. The goal is to become so psychologically strong that all your social interactions come from choice, not need. When you're with people, you're there because you genuinely want to be, not because you're afraid of being alone. When you're helping others, it's from abundance, not desperation. When you're in relationships, it's from strength, not weakness. This transformation doesn't happen overnight. But once it begins, it accelerates exponentially, because psychological strength, like physical strength, builds upon itself. The ultimate realization. The most powerful people in history weren't the ones who commanded the most followers. They were the ones who needed the fewest. Here's what most people never realize. Your ability to be alone determines your ability to be with others. When you're comfortable in solitude, you bring strength to every social interaction. When you're uncomfortable alone, you bring desperation to every relationship. People can sense this difference immediately, even if they can't articulate it. This is your ultimate destination. Becoming someone who enhances social situations rather than depending on them for emotional stability. Someone who adds value to relationships rather than extracting it. Someone who chooses solitude as a source of strength rather than experiencing it as punishment. When you reach this point, everything changes. You stop tolerating disrespect because you're not afraid of being alone. You start pursuing your authentic goals because you don't need social approval to feel worthy. You begin attracting higher quality people because you're operating from strength rather than neediness. Most importantly, you develop what I call existential independence, the ability to create meaning and purpose from within rather than seeking it from external sources. This is the difference between living and merely surviving, between thriving and just getting by, between being powerful and being controlled. And this brings us to the final, most important truth. The person you become in solitude is who you really are. The final invite. Everything else is performance. Every social interaction, every public presentation, every attempt to impress others, it's all theater. But in solitude, you can't hide from yourself. You can't perform for an audience that doesn't exist. You can't pretend to be someone you're not when no one is watching. This is why mastering solitude is the ultimate form of self-development. It's where you discover your authentic thoughts, feelings, desires, and capabilities. It's where you develop genuine self-respect instead of seeking it from others. It's where you learn to trust your own judgment instead of constantly seeking validation. Machiavelli understood that the most dangerous person is the one who has nothing to lose because they've learned to provide everything for themselves. They can't be manipulated with social pressure, controlled with isolation, or broken with rejection. They've become anti-fragile, stronger in the face of adversity rather than weaker. This is your invitation to become that person. To stop seeking completion in others and start finding it within yourself. To stop fearing solitude and start embracing it as your greatest advantage. To stop being someone who needs others and start being someone others need. Your journey toward becoming your most dangerous self begins the moment you turn off this video and sit alone with your thoughts. The moment you stop filling every silence with distraction. The moment you start choosing solitude over social performance. If this video has awakened something within you, if you recognize the prison of social dependency you've been living in, then you need to take action right now. Subscribe to this channel because the content I create is designed for people who are ready to face uncomfortable truths about themselves and society. Hit the notification bell because psychological transformation requires consistent exposure to ideas that challenge your current thinking. And most importantly, comment below with one specific way. You're going to practice intentional solitude this week. Your most powerful self is waiting for you in the silence. Stop running from it and start running toward it.